The first one, Frank Reich coming out and saying that Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack will serve as a 1-2 punch in the Colts backfield. I know we've sort of been trying to figure out how this thing works since the Colts drafted Taylor in the second round. We just talked about a committee potentially coming in Seattle. Does this sound, and do you believe there could be a committee coming in Indianapolis now?
See, Marcus, this is the general progression of a running back's value right after the draft. Mm-hmm. Players drafted, the industry goes bananas. Everybody loves him. Holy cow, this guy's going to be awesome. And then the coaches come in. We really like this player. He's not going to be given that starting job, sort of on a silver plate. Like they've got to earn it. They have to earn it. So when you hear about a scenario like you're mentioning with Taylor, Mack is going to play. Like Jonathan Taylor's not going to be a true featured back in the truest sense of the word. He's not going to be Ezekiel Elliott. He's not going to be Saquon Barkley. I would think he's going to get the majority of the touches, but Mack is going to play, and he's a good player. So don't expect Jonathan Taylor to come out and be an RB1. He's not. I mean, he's going to be an RB2 to me at best, unless Mack goes down with some sort of injury. And oh, by the way, you've also got Nyheim Hines who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So Jonathan Taylor, I love long-term. Mack is a free agent after the season, and Taylor's going to end up being the bell cow for a long, long time in Indianapolis. But as a rookie, you have to temper your expectations. He's an RB2. I don't know that his ceiling is high enough for him to be an RB1. There's a lot of talent at the top of that position, and Mack is going to get his share of the workload.
You know, the name you mentioned too, Nyheim Hines, is really sort of the fly in the ointment in this whole thing because, again, as you mentioned, he was the pass catcher. You know, when the Colts were playing from behind, when they were in that hurry-up offense, it was Hines that was on the field because they just didn't throw the football to Marlon Mack all that much. And Jonathan Taylor was not a huge pass catcher at Wisconsin. All the things that he did when he was with the Badgers, catching passes was really not one of them. And I don't imagine that all of a sudden Frank Reich's going to bring him in and ask. Not only will Frank Reich not just bring him in and ask that out of him, Phillip Rivers is not going to wait around for Jonathan Taylor to learn to become a pass catcher, right? We know this about Phillip Rivers. He is not necessarily the most patient guy when it comes to that, and especially now that he really is on the tail end of his career, I don't think he's going to wait. So if Nyheim Hines is the guy who can get that job done, catching the football, he's going to be the guy that's on the field, and that really does impact both of those guys. Now, part of me also thinks that this is sort of the things we hear in late April, early May. And when we get to July and August, if we are to have training camp, if we're going to get these guys on the field, that at some point we start to hear those training camp stories of how Jonathan Taylor looks so much better and how Jonathan Taylor deserves a starting job. Maybe this is just me sort of talking myself into it. But I feel like that's also the progression, right? That like we start hearing these camp hype stories with the rookies, getting all this work and maybe pushing the veteran out of a job. I don't know.
Yep. And one stat that I think fantasy owners need to keep in mind, last year, Phillip Rivers as a starter targeted backs out of the backfield as pass catchers more than any quarterback, more than anybody. That's Austin Eckler. That's Melvin Gordon. So that's also behind a crappy offensive line. So I wouldn't really take that into consideration and think, well, this is the be all end all, and he's going to be throwing to the backs a lot. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but with Hines and Marlon Mack in there, both guys are pretty good pass catchers and certainly better than Jonathan Taylor. So I would really tap the brakes on the ceiling for JT as a rookie. I like him. RB2, sure. He's not going to become the next Zeke. He's not going to become the next Saquon. It's just not going to happen. Well, not right away.
Especially not with Marlon Mack still there. It's definitely
exactly. Yes, sir.
More running back talk involving another rookie. General manager of the Chiefs, Brett Veach, says Damien Williams is still the starter in Kansas City, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire can, quote, compete for playing time. This is another one, Fabs. I mean, when the Chiefs drafted CEH, a lot of people, myself included, sort of went nuts over the pick.
Raising my hand.
And we talked about him being the number 1 overall dynasty rookie pick. It looks like Brett Veach has thrown a whole keg full of cold water on all of us.
But see, I feel like that again. It's the same thing. Like, yeah, of course, Damien Williams was a Super Bowl MVP candidate.
Right.
For the Chiefs. And over the last couple of years, Damien Williams, when he's been healthy, Marcus, has been pretty good. Like, I mean, last year they went like more of a committee. You know, they brought in LaShawn McCoy, and that kind of screwed things up. And, you know, Williams, in terms of his durability, could potentially be an issue. At the end of the day, they're not going to hand the starting role to a rookie in that scenario. It's not like you're Zeke or Saquon, where you're coming in, there ain't nobody else, okay? Like, you're going to be the guy. The Chiefs had a guy who was very successful. And I'll tell you something right now. If Damien Williams' success in the stat sheets and on the gridiron isn't enough to make you realize how good Andy Reid's offense is for running backs, nothing will, because he couldn't do diddly poo in Miami. He was a backup there. He goes to Kansas City. He's putting up good numbers. So, like, I feel like people need to, again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to end up leading that team in backfield touches. It's a matter of time. They are not going to give him the starting job on a silver plate. That's just not how it's done in these scenarios, because the veteran, hey, man, he helped them win a championship. The respect is there for him. Now, Williams is a free agent after 2020, and then, hell, the sky's the limit for the Glide. But this season, you have to expect that he's going to lose at least some touches to Damien Williams in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's earlier in the season, and as the season goes on, that will change, and he'll become more of the guy. But coaches are not going to come out and give a kid the starting job without him earning it, especially when there is a incumbent veteran who's still playing well ahead of him on the depth chart. Just not going to happen.
Yeah. And look, and we've talked about this before too. I do wonder how much of this is also going to be impacted by the fact that there are no OTAs. There's not going to be that opportunity for those guys to get work. I mean, you know, like, I know they're going to do some distance learning, you know, kind of some virtual virtual meetings and that sort of thing, virtual workouts, but it's not going to be the same as, you know, being able to get out there, put the pads on, and get some actual work in. And so that I think in a lot of situations is going to give a lot of these veterans sort of a leg up over the rookies, because they know the system, they know how this works, and these guys are still coming in to learn. So that, again, these are all the things that we've never had to think about before, because, you know, the world was one way and now it's another.
Exactly. I mean, they can give all these kids playbooks and they can study their butts off until you get out on the field, man, and get a feel for your offensive line as a running back, and get a feel for your quarterback as a wide receiver, and get a feel for your wide receivers as a quarterback. Like, you know, a rapport has to be built, and we're in uncharted territory as far as that goes right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, more running back news. It's funny how much of this centers around running backs. It wasn't intentional. It just sort of happened that way. Sean McVay was reported as saying, quote, "We've got 3 really good backs." And again, another rookie involved here, right? Cam Akers was one that a lot of us liked the landing spot for him and what he could be. You know, the Darrell Henderson train, depending on the week, is either full or empty. Right now, it's more on the empty side. And then there's still Malcolm Brown hanging around there, a guy who can get some touches. I think we were already sort of expecting Akers and Henderson to kind of, you know, sort of split in some form or fashion the workload in Los Angeles. Now, if we're talking Malcolm Brown in the mix, this looks like it could be really frustrating if Sean McVay is true to his word.
So here's a few things for the Cam Akers truthers out there, and I love the talent. I really do. And I think long-term, he could end up being a pretty nice piece for your fantasy football team. Keep this in mind, though, guys, okay? So Akers is not going to be a featured back as a rookie. It's just not. I mean, McVay is going to go committee. Darrell Henderson is going to be utilized in certain aspects of the offense. Malcolm Brown could end up being utilized in certain aspects of the offense. But if you look back at the numbers from last season, Malcolm Brown got more touches than Darrell Henderson. So we're all talking about Darrell Henderson as like the guy, but maybe it's Malcolm Brown. Like, if they didn't go running back in the draft, maybe it would have been a committee between Henderson and Malcolm Brown, and maybe Malcolm Brown is a starter there. Also, keep this in mind. As much as we like Akers as a versatile back, and he was pretty versatile, he had 28 catches in his final season at Florida State. When you look at the numbers from last season, no quarterback in the National Football League threw the ball to his backs less than Jared Goff. 8.5% of his pass attempts went to the running backs. 2 reasons. One, he's got a lot of good wide receivers, and Tyler Higbee came on late in that season and was fantastic. And the Rams were not as good of a team last season. So the Rams aren't a team, at least what we saw last season, that threw the ball to their backs. I mean, hell, Todd Gurley. You know, this is a guy who can catch 70 passes. He wasn't even close to that. So as much as I like Akers long term, you have to tap the brakes a little bit on him. And I've seen him go high in redrafts. I've seen him go in the 4th round in redrafts. And to me, that's a little bananas. Good player, really good long-term outlook this season, unless he is dynamic and ridiculous and just blows the doors off of Henderson and Malcolm Brown in camp, which is possible. I don't see a featured Todd Gurley role for him.
Yeah. No, I don't think we're going to see that in a Sean McVay offense for a while. I mean, unless you get one of those, I hate this term, but the quote unquote generational running backs.
Yes.
I hate it because I feel like we've had multiple generational running backs within the last 5 years, which, seems to defeat the purpose. But unless one of those guys falls in the Rams' lap sometime soon, I just don't think you're going to see anybody get that sort of workload. I think the Rams are going to go with multiple backs, and Akers and Henderson and Brown are probably that. The other thing I would like to go back, and I'm sure somebody has done this, or it's easy enough to go back and look what the sort of the line graph of rookie running back ADPs are from the time they're drafted, because it just seems like there's a big spike early, right, in their ADP.
Oh yeah.
And then then the stories come out, then we see them working in training camp, and not that they're bad necessarily, but reality sort of sets in a little bit that maybe there's another guy there, or maybe they're not coming along as fast as anticipated, and then that number sort of levels off a little bit. And I feel like we're seeing that with Taylor, with Edwards-Helaire, with Cam Akers, that right now we're in that spike phase where like the ADPs are really high. And then by the time we get to like August, it will sort of level off a little bit.
Yeah. And I'm seeing that a lot too. Cause I've been doing I did a mock draft for Sports Illustrated. We did one for SiriusXM last week. And yeah, I mean, like Jonathan Taylor and the Glide. Swift is more like in a 12-team league. I've seen him go like 5th round, which I feel like is kind of that's kind of where he belongs.
That's realistic, yeah.
But Taylor, I've seen go as high as the 2nd round. I've taken the Glide. I took him in the 3rd round in a draft. I've seen him go as high as the 2nd round, and some of the rookie wide receivers too, like Jalen Reagor. I love the talent long term. I can't see a scenario unless everybody ahead of him gets hurt that he's going to go out and have 800 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns as a rookie in Philadelphia. But I've seen him go as like the 2nd or 3rd wide receiver in a redraft. No, I know, it's insane. People really like what he could potentially bring to the table, but I just don't get it because like the Eagles have 100 wide receivers right now, and they're going to run a lot of 12 because they have 2 great tight ends. So whatever the case may be, I feel like long term that a kid like that's going to be much better. But you're right. Right now, everyone's yoked. They love the rookies. There are certainly rookies that I love. There are certainly rookies that you love. But I feel like once we get into July and August, depending on when we start drafting teams for real with the coronavirus, it'll calm down somewhat. Sure.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see it level out a little bit. Yeah. Over to Pittsburgh, longtime Steelers beat writer Ed Bouchette writes that the Steelers are expected to quote cut back on James Conner's carries. Now, look, Conner, when he's been healthy and has been on the field, has been very productive. The problem has been he just has not been able to stay healthy throughout his career. We talked earlier in the week about the rumor that the Steelers might not re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster. Now they're talking about cutting back on James Conner's carries. And Fabs, you've mentioned multiple times that this whole thing sort of hinges on Ben Roethlisberger staying healthy and being out there for the Steelers. There's just a lot of things now that make me really nervous about drafting Pittsburgh players. And I feel like that should, if it hasn't already, should sort of suppress their ADPs a little bit.
Yeah, no question about that. And one of the surprising things for me is that, I mean, and maybe the Steelers do it, but like they don't have a quality backup quarterback. And, when your quarterback is in his late 30s, coming off of a season-ending injury to his elbow, no less. I mean, like it's troublesome. I don't know why they haven't gone out and they didn't draft a quarterback or they didn't pick up a quarterback. We've said it a million times. We thought Jameis Winston would have been a really good fit for this offense. Should Ben Roethlisberger go down with an injury? I mean, they're not a team that's going to go after Cam Newton. Cam Newton's not going anywhere where he can't compete for a starting job. So that's not going to happen. I mean, do they bring in Joe Flacco? That ain't much better. It's like I don't even know who they would bring in at this point. So in terms of Conner, though, maybe cutting back on his touches. And Bouchette didn't say that it's a significant decrease, but maybe cutting back is sort of what the Steelers need to do to keep him on the field for 14 games or 16 games, because he is clearly the best back they have on the roster. And he has shown flashes of brilliance, especially when Le'Veon Bell held out. The kid was amazing. He helped people win fantasy leagues that season. And they did draft Anthony McFarland, but he's like my height. He's like 5'8". He's like over 200 pounds, but he's not going to be a featured back. So, and you've also got, Benny Snell there as well, and Jalen Samuels. So it's a little bit crowded, but James Conner, I'd love to have him as a flex. That's where I'd be comfortable getting him. I don't know if I can get him as a flex in a 12-team league. That's where I'd be comfortable getting him. I think most leagues, Marcus, where you're not in a 10-team league, he's probably going to end up being like a low RB2.
Yeah. Saying that then, in a normal, say, 12-team league, you're not touching Samuels or Snell right now, right? They're still on the waiver wire.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No question about that. I don't know that. Out of the three, you might get one that gets picked, in the late rounds, whether it's Samuel, if you're in a PPR league, it could be Snell. I don't know that McFarland's going to get drafted in redrafts because there's so much confusion. But at this point, James Conner is a safe, high-end flex starter if you can get him there. And that's sort of the scenario with like a Le'Veon Bell as well at this point after, the Jets signed Frank Gore, which we talked about earlier in the week.
Yeah. Last story I got here, we can do Real and Mirage on. Ron Rivera was quoted as saying, Antonio Gibson has, quote, a skill set like Christian McCaffrey. Now, I have sort of pegged Antonio Gibson as a late, a end of draft dart throw, that guy who maybe could work his way onto the field. He's sort of almost a hybrid, maybe a positionless guy. I've seen him listed as a running back. I've seen him listed as a wide receiver. He can do a little bit of everything. I think Fabs in Washington, he probably will have more success as a receiver just because they've got a lot of running backs there that they've got to try to get touches for, but the wide receiver position is a little more open. This feels like definite hype here. Saying he's got a skill set like Christian McCaffrey, that's one of those things that gets everybody, your eyes get big, you get excited. I want good things for him. I think he can be exciting. I'm not falling into this trap. I'm not going to fall into
saying that he has the skill set of Christian McCaffrey, he can catch the ball out of the backfield and he can run between the tackles. What exactly about McCaffrey? Is that it? I can argue that there's plenty of running backs in the league that can catch the ball out of the backfield and run between the tackles as effectively as Christian McCaffrey. Maybe not as a receiver, but pretty close. I talked to Darius Geis about this, and we kind of agreed that he's probably going to end up being more of a receiver than he is a runner in Washington. As you mentioned, they have 10 running backs or whatever it is. They have a ton of them. So, and this again, you have to like see through the coach speak and see through the excitement, and then look at reality. And the reality is that Antonio Gibson is not going to see enough touches to end up being fantasy relevant. Right. I don't know. I
don't think so.
I don't know if I'm crazy here because he just got compared to Christian McCaffrey. Maybe Rivera's a little crazy to do that. I get it. He's very talented. And the Redskins are going to use him as an offensive weapon, whether he's a running back or a wide receiver. I think they gave him a number in the 20s, so that would make him a running back. But it doesn't matter at this point. So is he worth a look in Dynasty? Heck yeah. Is he worth a look in redrafts? Probably not.
So the continuation of that quote, I pull it up here. This is a very versatile young football player that we really think is going to be a guy that can get on the field for us early and contribute. Look, it sounds exciting. It really does. So this sounds like years ago, when the Lakers were still playing at the Forum, and I remember Shaquille O'Neal had been injured for a long time. It was like finally making his return, and so I had a friend in town. We decided, hey, let's go see the Lakers. Shaq's back tonight. It's going to be great. Tickets were sold out, but we get there, and a guy is selling tickets out front, and he's like, hey man, you got to buy these. Like they're second row, right across from the Lakers bench. We're like, oh yeah. We were both young. Like I was like 22. Yeah. I was 22. My friend might have been 23, 24. So we're like, oh sweet. So we pay for these tickets. And I'll say this, the dude didn't lie. They were second row, right across from the Laker bench in the upper deck. Like he left that part out. He left that part out of his little spiel. And I sort of feel like this too. Like, okay, Antonio Gibson, like young, versatile football player that can get on the field and contribute. maybe in third down situations when we're trailing in the fourth quarter. Like, I feel like there's a part of this that Ron Rivera is sort of leaving out, and that's why I'm not willing to get sucked in all the way.
That sounds like that episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm where do you remember that one, Eddie? Do you watch Curb? I don't even remember if you watch Curb or not, but like, you remember that episode where him and Jeff were with the NBC executive and they got him Lakers tickets and they're thinking, oh man, this is going to be great. And then they go and they're like literally in the upper deck of Staples Center, like looking down at all the celebrities who have great seats. But by the way, I had Jeff Garland on my Sirius XM show. I love, dude, he is so much fun. He's creative with his language, but so much fun, man. I love Jeff. He's awesome. He's awesome.
So, yeah, it's a fun dude.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Between that and what's his other show? The Goldbergs.
The Goldbergs. Yeah, dude. I mean, he's great. And Eddie, he also hinted that there's going to be another season of Curb.
I mean, as good as the last one was, I'm all for it. I mean, I think they're on a good path right now.
Yeah, no doubt.